Hey, 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 geeks and geekettes and shut-ins of all kind. Uh, this is Chuck Dixon, and I'm here to talk about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is write comic books. And I recently, well, yesterday, solicited on Facebook for some questions. So why don't we just jump right in there? Okay, Steve Lowenthal writes, have you ever worked with an editor you thought at the time didn't know his stuff? But as your experience increased, you look back and now see his criticisms as being constructive. um, yeah, this is a troublemaking question. Um, yeah, comics are a broad medium. you know, there's not a whole lot of subtlety in the medium itself. I mean, the medium can be subtle, but it's a series of static pictures that tell a story, and sometimes with words, sometimes without. um, it's kind of cooked into my DNA for some reason. My mutant ability is to work in this particular, specific, odd medium. So um, I, I I was such a student of comics that and had so many firm opinions about the art form, and was you know entirely conversant with it. I'm not stroking my ego or anything. I just made my life about studying comics. So I didn't run into a lot of editors who knew more than me, particularly in the 70s when I was going up for interviews. I mean, these guys were only maybe a couple of years older than me. And for the most part, they weren't comic book or they weren't comics medium aficionados as much as superhero fans. So I was more about the medium, they were more about the characters. So there wasn't a whole lot uh, they could teach me. Now, that said, I had some awesome editors. Archie Goodwin, a comic book writing legend and a fantastic editor, and will forever have the title of the nicest man in comics. Um, he, I would, he would allow me to come to Marvel and see him. I would talk to him at conventions, so he knew who I was. And I would call, can I come up for an interview? And I would show him my absolutely miserable offerings for pitches. I was in my 20s. I didn't know what I was doing. Um, and he would always take the time and he would look over everything. And amazingly, he would look at my utterly piece of crap stuff and find things in it to make it work better. I mean, he took trash and turned it into, I don't know, recyclables. What's just above trash? But completely patient, just a terrific guy. And I worked with him as an editor at both DC and Marvel, and you know, we were always on the same page about everything. He liked comics to be cinematic, and I liked comics to be cinematic. So um, next one up here is Larry Hama. Larry Hama, lethal Larry Hama, as the picture says. He was my editor at Marvel on Savage Sword of Conan and a few other different projects. And he was you know, awesome guy to work with. He, um, I guess he taught me more about how to deal with editors than anything else because Larry's always been an anti-authority figure. It doesn't matter what the authority is. He's skeptical, and he taught me that skepticism. And he was very much a guru as well as a promoter. I mean, he went to other Marvel editors and suggested that they hire me based on my reliability. The one thing Larry did teach me, and it was during my wilderness years in the mid 2000s, Larry said to me, "Your stories make sense, your characters are likable, and you hand your work in on time, and they'll never forgive you for that." And truer words were never spoken. So Denny O'Neil, another great editor, another legend. He hired me to work on Robin out of the blue. And from my standpoint, I never met Denny. I interviewed at DC once, and he was in the room. I think I think it was Dan Raspler who actually interviewed me, and Denny sort of sat at another desk pretending to be busy, and nothing came of it. And then he sort of reached out and for me based on my work on Airboy to do a Robin miniseries because he liked the way I wrote a young character. I didn't make any efforts to be hip or trendy or whatever kids call it now. And he appreciated that um, I wrote a younger character earnestly rather than as a stereotype. And you know, I mean, obviously Denny was a terrific editor, um, and he, as far as I'm concerned, is Batman. I mean, he saved Batman from the camp graveyard that he had fallen into after the 1966 television series, and everything that happened with Batman after Denny's involvement, belongs to Denny, as far as I'm concerned. Um, Another terrific editor was Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson is sort of Robin to Denny's Batman. Scott was an associate editor and then became an editor in his own right. And Scott just knew how to push my buttons and challenge me and encourage me. And he was probably the most conscientious editor I've ever worked with. He would literally call once a week to make sure that he wasn't ignoring me. Because he didn't have any reasons to call me because I was always on deadline or ahead of deadline. But he would call and say, are you okay? Are you feeling neglected? Or and I never was. I was just like, leave me alone, let me work. Okay, another editor, Cat Ironwood. Cat Ironwood at Eclipse Comics. I guess Cat is actually my first editor ever. She edited my early efforts at Eclipse on horror comics and sci-fi comics for their anthologies, and was my editor on my run at Airboy, which was one of the more successful titles at Eclipse. I think the only title at Eclipse to run as long as 50 issues. And we had fun arguing about politics. Cat is a anarcho-syndicalist communist, and proud of it. I'm sure she still is to today. And we had a lot of great discussions. Like myself, she was a real comic book and comic strip historian, so we kind of spoke the same language. And again, she knew how to challenge me, and she knew, when to tell me that my stuff was crap. Okay, another editor whose picture I can't find anywhere on the internet is Mystery Man Don Daly. Don Daly was my editor on all the Punisher work I did. He was briefly, I think, for 1 week, my Conan editor. Uh, Don is. I always say there's two kinds of editors, and then there's Don Daly. There's the editor who hires you and wants to tell you what to do, and there's the editor who hires you and leaves you alone to do what you do. In other words, they trust you. Don was different in every way. He was probably the guy that challenged me the most. I mean, he would basically, how fast can you write a script? He hunted me down at a friend's house once because an artist had just come in whose wife had had a baby and needed money. Now I'm at my friend's house, and Don found me there and said, "Can you write this guy a story?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow." And he goes, "Well, can I have something today?" I said, "What do you mean today? I'm at my friend's house. I'm away from my computer. I can't write anything here." And he goes, "Well, just tell me something over the phone." So I gave him the opening 3 pages, the snipe, Punisher as a sniper in the snow, and got the artist started. And then the next day wrote some more pages and sent them in, so that the poor guy had some cash for his newborn. And but that's the way Don rolled. You know, he kept me busier than any other editor. He was constantly coming up with specials and one shots. A great Don Daly story is there was a comic book artist who murdered his wife, and Don wasn't aware of the story. Everyone else in comics knew. Don apparently was not in the grapevine on this story, and he saw some of the guy's work, and said, we need to hire him for Conan. And Tim Toohey, his assistant editor, said, we can't hire this guy, Don. Uh, he's in prison. Don's like, for what? What's he? He's in prison. What's he in prison for? And Tim said he killed his wife with a hammer. And Don, without any irony, sarcasm, or trace of humor, very earnestly said, damn, he'd be a great artist for Conan. That's all you need to know about Don Daly. Just the guy was a pistol. What can I say? Next question. We all want physical comics to continue to exist. This is from Robert Rivard. We all want physical comics to continue to exist. What format, printing, content, and distribution changes do you think are required for this to happen? Or do you feel it's a lost cause? I don't think it's a lost cause, but the key to it is to get new readers, and the new readers we need are kids. The, the, the hottest time in my career was the early 90s, and kids were buying comics. You'd go to a convention, and there would be children in line to get their comics signed. And the majority of the line would be children or adolescents. And, that was super encouraging. This was a new generation of readers being introduced to comics. Unfortunately, it's the last generation to be introduced to comics. We've skipped an entire generation or more of potential comic readers. They don't have the comic reading habit. Comics are not available to them. They're not readily available. They're not on the newsstand. They're not at their friends' houses. The place they see them first are probably the library. Comics are in the library are pretty much the front line. Yes, there are comic shops, but no one goes into a comic shop cold. You have to have been introduced to the medium and have an interest first. You don't, it's like going to a convenience store and then going to Whole Foods. It's like, you're not going to walk in cold. You have to have an interest in the comics medium before you walk into that shop. And that's just not happening. Comic shops are seeing the same customers, the same shrinking customer base, decade after decade. Now, how would I fix it? I don't know. I would try everything. I would go back to what Stan Lee came up with in the 70s, which was plateau marketing. Create comic books for kids and get them in front of kids. And then, they graduate to the superhero comics and horror comics, and then give them something more substantial to move on to. In plateau marketing, it was Marvel's horror magazines and Savage Sword of Conan. And then at the end of the road was Epic Illustrated, which was a comic specifically made for adult readers. That kind of thing, might work if it's attractively packaged. I mean, if you look at the magazine racks, there's an awful lot of different kinds of magazines that are apparently very successful. If the comics book industry did an actual magazine, with attractive covers and all the rest of it, and their best content, their most universally accessible content, mainstream content. I mean, I see the Walmart books, the 100-pagers from DC. I don't think that they're put in the right part of the store. They're in the collectibles aisle with the trading cards. I mean, you have to look for them to see them. Comics should be out where the kids can see them without looking. And they should be produced so that they're seductive, so they draw the kid in with the cover, with the interiors, with everything. I mean, the problem with comics, as I said in another video, is that comic books have never been marketed, never really been marketed, and they really don't know how to do it. So yeah, I don't have all the answers, but my answer is just try everything and see what works. And go back to redundant publishing. Go back to publishing what's popular. When a genre or a character is popular, just double down on it until you've ridden that horse to death. That's an old, reliable standby for the comic book industry, and it would probably still work. And then just swing for the fences and try to find that hit. I mean, I always use the example of Axe Cop. I mean, Axe Cop became this webcomic sensation. Just high concept, crazy, goofy idea that captured people's imaginations. And instead of going back to the same characters over and over again, the same genres over and over again, just get some good, reliable, innovative comic creators and just let them swing for the fences. So, okay, let's go on here. Would you ever consider writing for indie films? No. I hate writing in final draft. I hate the screenplay writing form. It's very challenging for me, and I don't do my best work in it. I've tried it, and the biggest problem for me is I don't feel it. I don't feel it the way I feel comics. When I write a comic book, I can see the pages in my head. I can see the panels in my head. When I write in final draft, try to write a screenplay, I don't see the movie. I don't see it. I don't, and my dialogue doesn't work. I write dialogue that works for comics. It doesn't work for the big screen, or little screen or any screen. And now I've actually turned down opportunities to write screenplays. I know I'm the only, and I'm the only guy that's ever done that. That's what I've been told over and over again. I said, I don't want to write this screenplay. And the producer says, no one's ever said that before. Treatments, movie treatments, I will write all day long. They're not a whole lot of fun for me, but it's the story mechanics. It's basically a more fleshed out outline, and it's story, and I can deal with that. I can write treatments till the cows come home, and have, you know, I can churn out a treatment in a couple of days, based on a concept that's given to me, and make the characters and the plots and situations work as a story. But no, screenplays not for me. Okay, let's see. Have you been writing Captain America in your head for 30 years? This is from Rick Hanna. Um, no, not really. The only character I still write in my head that, and I don't get paid for, is the Punisher. But Cap, I love Cap. This particular comic, his reemergence in Avengers #3, is it? Was a watershed moment in my childhood. I knew who Captain America was, vaguely, and I knew when I saw this cover at the drugstore that this was big stuff, and made a big impression on me as a kid. And I read the covers off of this book. Um, but no, I've never. A lot of people ask me about writing Captain America because it seems like it would be a good fit for me, and I've only taken a few stabs at it when I was doing What If. The problem for me is that I was never in the mainstream at Marvel. I was always off to the side doing Conan or Punisher or Alien Legion. I was never really in the mainstream at Marvel. And so I was never considered for it, except for the time that Rob Liefeld wanted me to write Captain America. And that turned into an abortion. And I quit because it was just such a miserable looking product, and really nothing like I had envisioned for the character. So yeah, I'd revisit it, if I guess, if I had the opportunity, but I don't think about Captain America as a creator to any significant degree. Mark Randall writes, what do you think about Marvel's new superheroes, Snowflake and Safe Space? What impact will they have on comics? Will it drive adult readers to stop reading, or will indie comics flourish? Oh, another loaded question. Um, I don't think it'll have any impact. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't think it'll sell. I think it's a asterisk in comic history. It'll it'll be gone swiftly. Um, will it drive adult readers away? I think most of the adult readers have already been driven away. There's probably some speculators left, and some diehards who have to have everything, or want to complete their runs, or whatever. Um, but I don't, you know, this is going to come and go. This is a blip. Hopefully, it's a blip, or a epic failure that they learn from. I don't think so, because they've had so many epic failures and they keep doubling down on the same thing. Political agenda and diversity and all the rest of it. And it's like, if you've got to tell people your comics are diverse, um, you're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. I always wrote diversity into my comics without being conscious about it being diversity. I was simply being honest. When I wrote stories like The Punisher, set in urban environments, And Batman in Gotham City, I wrote characters that reflected my own experience living in a city. So I wrote all different kinds of people because that's the way it was. I never thought, oh, I'm going to get a pat on the back for doing this. I just thought it makes the stories more believable if the world these characters are living in looks more like our own, where there's people of all types. And but yeah, this kind of virtue signaling, it's dooming Marvel, and by dooming Marvel, you're dooming the industry because Marvel is our leader. They're the market leader. They always will be, even when they don't have the number one market share. They're still the market leader. Everybody looks to Marvel as the bellwether for comic sales, and things like this really hurt. David N. Taylor says, "Who were or are your favorite collaborators and why?" And Drew Geraci has quite graciously recused himself from this question. Drew, you're a trip. Okay, I think my favorite collaborators pretty much fall into who was my most frequent collaborators. My most frequent collaborator is Gary Quapis, Gary. Uh, we've been together, well, we still work together, 35 years maybe of working together. He was my first and favorite artist on Savage Sword of Conan. We went into our own publishing venture, Civil War adventure graphic novels, as you can see here. Um, we still do a weekly Pellucidar comic strip for EdgarRiceBurroughs.com. It's been going on for 6 years, my friends. We've never missed a week. And, you know, yeah, geez, we worked on The Punisher together, just tons and tons of stuff that he and I have collaborated on. And, you know, I think the Civil War thing was our closest collaboration because, you know, Gary became a Civil War bug. Um, you know, he can tell you what happened between, you know, 2 and 2:15 on the third day of Gettysburg now. I mean, he's just an amazing font of knowledge on the war between the states. But you know, because we were the bosses on it, you know, we had a lot of phone conversations, a lot of discussions about where we wanted to go and what the emphasis of the book was going to be and all the rest of it, in addition to him doing the bulk of the artwork for the series. Okay, another guy is Graham Nolan, trying to look pensive and thoughtful. Uh, this is the look he gives me when he doesn't like what I'm saying. Uh, Graham is my, you know, right behind Gary as a collaborator that I still work with. You know, we worked on Skywolf back at Eclipse, and we had a long run on Detective together. And we've done various projects with the Phantom and our own creator-owned property, Joe Frankenstein. And you know, I like working with Graham, and he's probably of all the artists I work with, he's been my closest collaborator on several projects. I remember Joker's Advocate. We actually met in New York and spent a couple of days plotting that together. And Joe Frankenstein, we worked very closely on. Um, you know, Gary Graham. Graham is an excellent comic writer in his own right, and you know, terrific storyteller. And we have a great give and take, and he's willing to tell me when I'm full of crap, um, and I'm willing to stand my ground when I think I'm right. And we've always been brutally honest with each other, which is the secret to a true collaboration. You can't tiptoe around the other guy's ego. Um, and you know, I don't think either of us have an enormous ego about comics. I think we both realize that we work in the shadow of the comic book greats who came before us, and we're just pleased to be in the medium together, you know, and like working together for that reason. So next one up is Flint Henry. That's I don't have a picture of Flint. That's Flint's self-portrait down there in the right-hand corner. That's he and I in a John Woo movie. Um, I couldn't find a picture of Flint on the internet, and typical of Flint, when you Google his name and hit images, you get pictures of Henry Flint, another comic book artist from the UK. So I remember once a of a comic book publication, I can't remember which one, got confused and referred to Flint Henry as a popular English artist. And Flint showed it to me, and I said, "Well, he got both parts wrong. You're neither English nor popular." But Flint was another one of my earliest collaborators, a guy who lived in my area uh, at the time when I was breaking into the comics industry big time. And I just love his work. I love his work, and I love everything about it. I love working with the guy. He'll tell you that we didn't really collaborate. He just did what I told him to do. But the truth is that, his wild nature and his unlimited imagination and his ability to just get as wacky as hell really inspired me. The stories that I wrote for Flint, I couldn't have written for anybody else. I wrote them for Flint, and knowing, or imagining, or supposing what he would do with them. And he always brought more to the table than even I asked for. And we had our own creator title, Law Dog, which Flint always says, "Oh, I should have gotten a better artist." Flint's very self-effacing, if you haven't gotten that already. And most of the great artists are self-effacing. And I told him I couldn't have created Law Dog without him. I created Law Dog for him. I created Law Dog inspired by his artwork. And he's probably right behind Graham as my most frequent collaborator. So I know there's other people I collaborated with long term, and I apologize to all of them, but I can't turn this into an endless list. I've worked with some tremendous artists. I've been a very lucky guy in this arena. Kenny Todd writes, I was just thinking, you wrote Robin annuals for 4 different events. What was your favorite and why? Yeah, actually, I think it was more than 4. Um, every year they came up with some sort of gimmick for the annuals to either tie them together or, I don't know, come up with a theme. And I remember Dead Earth. I don't remember a lot about it. I just remember it takes place way in the future on a generation ship, if I remember correctly. So it's basically Gotham City in space. The Robin Year One was an opportunity for me to write a Dick Grayson story, which was really cool. I liked that a whole lot. And the others were the Bloodlines annual. Bloodlines was basically we were going to create a whole bunch of new superheroes that all shared the same origin, which I I vocally said was ridiculous when I first heard about it. I said to a room full of editors that, we're going to come up with a line of superheroes that all have exactly the same origin. They got bit by a giant space bug. But, but I had fun writing this. I had Kieran Dwyer on art and Garcia Lopez inking. I mean, who wouldn't like it? I enjoyed writing the story. It was a lot of fun, and it looks absolutely freaking gorgeous. Um, Next one up here is they did an annual stunt called Pulp Heroes, which I thought, again, complained to a room full of editors, seemed kind of redundant since comics and pulps are pretty much, joined by an umbilical cord. I mean, there's not a lot of daylight between comic books and pulp, but I wrote it. It was a modern day Western. And I got to bring back some, Powell Smith and, oh God, I can't remember the other character. And uh, use the Trigger Twins, and of course the art is by Eduardo Barreto. Just Ed was such an awesome talent, and this was a great story for him to work on with the Western theme. It was set um, current day. It wasn't an Elseworlds or anything else. It's just a comic with a Western theme. Chance to get Robin and the Huntress on horseback and dealing with cowboy themes. And then we have the Robin annual. Um, it was Elseworlds uh, that summer, and this is my favorite of all the Robin annuals. It's set in the samurai era, and the artwork is by Enrique Villagrán. and it's absolutely freaking gorgeous. I mean, he did the homework. It really looks terrific. It looks in period, and it's action packed, and all the rest of it. And the one thing I remember about this annual is that Denny O'Neil, when the artwork came in, he said that he had never seen a comic book story where the artist hewed so closely to the script as this annual, which I didn't notice because I don't go back and compare to the script. But then he said that um, it was exactly what I wrote, which is, I guess, a compliment. I don't know, but um, I loved working with Enrique, and another frequent collaborator. Just a terrific guy, Argentine artist from Buenos Aires, one of the Villagrán brothers, and he always totally committed himself to whatever he was doing. And I always knew when I worked with Enrique that I was going to end up with something that looked absolutely gorgeous. He had just a beautiful inking line, and he was an excellent storyteller as well. He would call storytelling things, gags, ideas. He would look at an artist whose storytelling he liked and say, I like his ideas. So, okay, next question. Darby Kern says, do you prefer Moon Knight before you left your imprint on the character or the stuff they've done since? Do you even bother reading it? Well, I never read any Moon Knight after I left. Um, but the Moon Knight before, I like what Doug Mensch did. I remember the early Marvel previews and early appearances, and I read all that stuff. With Sienkiewicz on the artwork, and I liked it. Um, when I came on Moon Knight, let's get a Moon Knight image up here just for the heck of it. When I came on Moon Knight, my directions were to get rid of the three personalities. Moon Knight has split personalities, kind of Sybil in a cape. And my editor, Carl Potts, wanted to get rid of that asset, that facet of the character, and concentrate on him being a former mercenary. And I liked that idea. And it was kind of more in my wheelhouse to do that kind of thing. And I had, I was a big fan of the movie Dogs of War. And if you read the comic now, if you've seen that movie, you'll see a lot of the elements from that movie in the comic. And I just sort of leaned into Mark Spector as a former military guy, and a lot of the adventures grew out of his past as a mercenary. Characters he met as Mark Spector, he met again as Moon Knight. And then the book also gave me an opportunity to cross over with the Punisher and other Marvel characters. So I got the right Punisher, Spider-Man, characters like that, Daredevil, which as I said before, I was never mainstream at Marvel. This is as close to mainstream at Marvel as I ever got, a 2-year run on Moon Knight. And even so, Moon Knight's kind of a ancillary second tier character, in the Marvel universe, but not really, that kind of thing. But what this series did was instill a hatred for me from Doug Mensch, who thought it was my idea to get rid of all of his ideas and run with this. It wasn't. It was editorially driven, and I didn't mean to step on his toes, but I think to this day he thinks it's a slap in the face or something. I don't know. This is why I don't read books after I leave them, because I don't want to know what's being done with the characters I was writing. So, Doug, my apologies for whatever slight you think I may have made toward you. Okay, Scott Horak writes, who was the easiest character for you to write? I don't know. Um, yeah, I have an affinity for Frank Castle. I don't know what it says about me, but I love the character. And it's just easy. I still think of Punisher stories all the time. I mean, I remember when the Hurricane Katrina hit. I thought, wow, if I was writing the Punisher, what a field day. The coronavirus thing. Can you imagine the Punisher? You know, he's having a hard time finding criminals because the crime rate's down so low. They're all holed up somewhere. Or maybe he'd like that. He knows where they'll be, Oh, but you see what I mean? I mean, my mind just starts going. You name something, I'm off to the races with the Punisher. He's one of those reactive characters. The crap hits the fan, and you push the Punisher in front of it, and you got a story. So, on that note, Um, I write a series of novels called Levon Cade for Wolfpack Publishing. They're available on Amazon and Kindle and in print. I have a new one out called Levon's Home right now, and it kind of scratches my Punisher itch to go back to the previous question. It Levon is also a former Marine. He's got a young daughter. He lives in Alabama, and he just always seems to get in trouble or trouble finds him, and he creates all of his own problems and difficulties, but he manages to shoot his way out of them every single time. So sort of I guess sort of a modern Western, but it's very much in the vigilante crime genre. And there are 7 novels to date, and I'll be working on an 8th one before the year is out. And that's about it. I got a lot more questions. People bombarded me with questions, so I'm going to be doing more of these in the near future. And I hope you will check in and keep asking questions, and I'll get to them all eventually, I suppose. All right. Well, this is Chuck Dixon signing off, and I'll see you down the road.